Good afternoon, Scott Brown here again with part two of our interview with Sean Lulchuk with Far West Capital. Sean, how are you today?
Doing very well. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for joining us. We're talking about alternative financing, meaning non-bank finance. And in today's business world, since probably 2008 it would seem, wouldn't you say? The banking world has been a difficult place for businesses.
For the small to medium-sized enterprises, definitely. Large businesses, the multi-billionaire types, seem to be doing okay.
Well, the old rule is if you don't need money, they'll lend it to you, right?
That's true.
For the rest of us who do need some working capital to meet payroll, to ensure that our vendors are paid on time, and to keep continuity in our business, and well, frankly, to keep our stress level down. And I know from being in business for 12 years, I can remember going to the mailbox on Thursdays especially, and opening the door and sitting there and waiting for the postal person to put whatever checks were coming that day, because payroll was tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so with companies like Sean's and services like Sean provides, the opportunity to have working capital and not have to go check the mailbox is much bigger. And so, Sean, what you provide is, well, several products really, both an ABL product we can talk about. You provide a factoring solution, mm-hmm. and occasionally for clients who are already have joined the party with Far West, you'll provide some purchase order financing.
Sure, and we'll also do some short amortization term loans too. We can do some equipment, some real estate in special situations, and or true term loan, if the company cash flows well enough.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What opportunities are you seeing out there today? As when I say that, I mean, what kind of companies mostly are coming to you?
Sure, that's a great question. These days, we found that there's a lot of oil and gas companies seeking right now with the big change that's happening in that market. Construction businesses, just by virtue of the nature of the cyclical business cycle in that industry, they're on an uptick right now. So as companies grow mm-hmm. and add more volume, they tend to need our type of services where we can come in and help close that gap between when they have money, when they need it, cover payroll, cover vendor payments, be able to take on new opportunities.
Let me ask you a question. We touched on construction, and construction companies have kind of notoriously been, in the world I'm familiar with, they've been, and guys, you've earned this reputation if you're watching this, and you've worked hard for it, you've been very bad about paying your bills on time. And so construction companies, they tend to have either subcontractors or at least suppliers.
Right.
I mean, let's say a roofing company, and they're going to go and buy shingles. So a roofing company buys shingles, and they've been given the grace of net 30 terms with ABC Shingle Company.
Sure.
Now,
always right in that 30-day window.
Yes, and
to your credit, you're playing the game. You're trying to do it the right way, right? And everybody takes as much as they can in business. There's a game that it comes and goes, but once you start getting to that, all right, now we're 60 days out.
Right. That's where I was
now
headed.
we're 90 days out, and you get those knocks on the door, you get the phone calls, and Jimmy wants to know, man, I'm trying to help you here, but
yeah,
what can we do about that?
And so contractors could be the best at doing the ostrich and putting their head in the sand sometimes, and no one can get a hold of them. Yeah. Anyway,
I think we're all good at that. That's pretty human, when you've got a problem, and you want to call it a problem, whatever it is, it's a situation you need to deal with. Oftentimes it's easier just to try and put it out of mind, right? We'll deal with that at some point down the line.
Right.
Well, what we like to say is really helping companies unleash potential is, let's deal with it now.
Right. And so
we can look forward.
In the deals that I've worked with you, where I've had someone in the construction industry and I've referred them to Sean, one of the things Far West has done that I found very interesting is, and by the way, let me back up and precede that and say there are a very small fragment, and I mean a tiny number, count them on one hand almost, of lenders who will lend to the construction industry. Far West being one of them. And when I've referred those opportunities to Sean, one of the things that they've done, I felt very helpful, and eventually, and and I would say that, I mean, in a few days, the client found it very helpful. They had a little bit of a tough time at first, kind of swallowing the thought of giving up some control, but once they tried it, they understood things really worked out for the better. And what I mean is, Far West makes sure that either the construction client, or they do it for them, pays their vendors on time.
Right.
You make sure that the lienable AP, if you will, accounts payable, that can be subject to causing a lien
Right.
and problems, you make sure that that is paid on time.
Yeah, it's paid out of our advances against those invoices. And so, and this isn't necessarily exclusive to the construction industry, but this is a great example because most of the payables, whether it's material people, whether it's subcontractors, whether it's equipment rental that's specific to a job that you're asking me to lend against, those guys have to get cleared off, right? Because technically you've been paid once I've made my advance to you.
Right.
So the theory goes is, well, I've worked really hard to develop these relationships with my vendors, and they're giving me 60 days, they're giving me 90 days. They're saying just pay me when you can, right? But that robbing Peter to pay Paul, that taking out of one pocket, put it in the other pocket, that only can go on for so long. And within the construction industry, those of you who've been in it for any length of time know that can contract real quickly.
Right.
And if you don't have future jobs and bigger and future jobs, then you can run into a problem where that Peter or Paul game dries up real fast. So if we clear all that out of the advance,
And so when
everybody stays happy.
When we say in
and you might
advance,
even get discounts from your vendors if you can pay them quickly.
that's an idea we're going to hit on in just a minute, folks. There's some hidden gravy to go on top of the steak here. And so what we mean when Sean says an advance, I'm a contractor and I have an invoice to my client that I'm building a property for, and I'm allowed, of course, in the construction industry, progress billing is allowed along the way, and so I've issued an invoice, and I submit that to Sean's firm. And what they're going to do, as we've talked about in the factoring industry, they're going to advance me, on average, this is a round number, 80% of that invoice now, and the rest when the client pays. So when Sean says advance, he's talking about when the invoice is ready, it's submitted. Prior to sending you, the business owner, 80% of the invoice, they're going to, what are you going to do? You're going to have them send an AP report along with it?
Right. So, and again, it depends on the relationship, depends on the documentation necessary. But generally, we want to see evidence your customer wanted the good or service that you're providing, evidence they got it, and evidence you invoiced them for it. Right. With that, we will validate and verify, is what we call it in our world, that amount. So, if you're one of my customers, I'll ring your AP department up and say, hey, Scott, I see I got invoice number 123 here for $10,000, $100,000, whatever it is,
Right.
$1 million. Just want to verify that's what you have listed in your books, and I can rely on that number that you're telling me is something that's going to get paid. I'm not saying you're paying me today, but at some point you do plan on paying that. Yes, that's a verified invoice, should be fundable.
So yes, Sean, that invoice from ABC Contractor is accurate. We'll get that paid in due course. And what else do you need to know? Nothing. That's all. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And so now you have an AP report.
Right.
You go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to tack onto that also, is that out of that we can also sometimes learn information that our client may not know. Right. The AP
Does that really happen?
It happens quite often. I mean, I don't want to say make it imply that it's a everyday occurrence, but given the number of clients we deal with, it's a pretty common occurrence where we'll ring up somebody to verify a balance, and we'll find out that, oh, well, this box didn't make it on that truck, or they'd estimated that they'd get so much done by the 30th of the month, but really once the 30th came and went, it was a little bit short, so we're not going to pay that full amount. They can bill it next month. So we can help strengthen the relationships between our clients and their customers by working together and having an extra that extra conversation can layer in a lot of additional rapport building.
So just through your very light touch, if you will, of calling to just verify an invoice, which has to be done, you may get wind of a dispute or a short pay or something that's going to occur, that perhaps that payables clerk is going to get around to calling contractor ABC and saying, we need more backup data, or we need something else in order to pay this, and they don't get to it for 2 weeks, and the contractor's sitting there thinking the check's coming, and they haven't even remembered to call and say there's a problem.
And there have been a couple of occasions where we found out that our client was about to be awarded another piece of business that they bid on and just hadn't heard anything about. So we actually get to preempt and tell them that they're winning a piece of business, which is
By the
always
way,
something they want to hear,
The
right?
contract's in the mail. You won that bid. You didn't even know it, right?
That part happens less often.
That's great. That's great. So, Far West has been instrumental in the opportunities I've had with them in seeing that the contracting sector keeps up with their payables, because the problem, those of you not in the contracting business might not understand this, but the problem is in that world, if you don't pay vendors have in many states have a right to go and file a lien on the property that's under construction. And when you're drawing from construction funds from a bank, a construction loan, they can halt the future advances if there's a lien bearing down on it. It can just cause a lot of problems. I'm sure there's way more to it than that, but
It's a very convoluted set of laws, and each state's got a different nuance to it. And so if you're doing a deal in Georgia versus Florida versus New York versus California versus Washington, it's a little bit different. But generally speaking, that ability to enforce a lien on the project
right.
causes most generals and most owners a little bit of heartache. They want to make sure that their contractors, their subcontractors, pay their vendors.
Right. It's a big deal.
And it's the right thing to do, and it's also how you win more business.
It
Right?
is.
If you get your guys paid, they're going to want to do more jobs for you. You're going to get more wins on the award side because if your paperwork and everything is done, ready to go, they're going to pay you first because they don't have to worry about it.
I love dealing with the construction guys and the business owners that have the acumen that think ahead and say, you know what, if I treat my subs well, if I treat the folks that help me be successful well, they'll continue to want to help me, they'll continue to do good work, and I'll get a priority sort of service when they're busy. The ones that are a little more short-sighted and just kind of try to, get away with a little of everything.
Deal thing, I get it too, though. Trust me, I understand how that mentality comes to pass. But you're absolutely right. The clients that seem to do the best are the ones that are trying to solve for a future, right?
It's a long term.
They've defined what their future looks like, and a large part of that is, they're thinking about how does this reflect on me as an individual, right? How does this reflect on my family, my friends,
Right.
my business, my employees,
Right.
right? You want to create something that you'll be proud to hand off or sell at some point.
Exactly. Let me ask you a question, switching gears and talking about perhaps a different industry, talking about the service industry, something I'm a little familiar with. It's been about 12 years in that business, and one of the things in the service industry that was, the thing, Sean, that was the big pressure in my life was not vendors. I could call a vendor, and if I had a relationship with them, I could say, listen, I know it's net 30, but how about, net 300, no, net 60. Can I be a week late and stay in touch with them and let them know that it's
Like
coming?
a little bit of equity.
How about some stock certificates in exchange? But seriously, I could work with vendors, and they very often were very reasonable. But one thing was not. One thing had no leeway, and that was if you come in on Friday and you tell 60 employees waiting on a payroll check, can you hold that for a minute?
Yeah, how about next Tuesday?
Yeah, it doesn't work well.
Yeah, I spoke with a guy last week. He has 80 employees, and he's kind of in a position right now where he took out some of these quick loans that you can get by submitting an application, some bank statements.
You might like the
And
merchant cash
they
advance
serve
type.
a very specific purpose for a very narrow need. But a lot of companies have taken it out, and I don't necessarily blame anybody for this because it's easy.
It's easy capital.
3 or 4 pieces of paper and you can get $500,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but
We'll pay back $1 million.
what he also found, what he's found out is that this particular company didn't move some of the funds the way they were supposed to, because it was a unique arrangement where they sweep the funds, they collect, and then they move the receivables over. This didn't happen a few occasions, and so he was short.
Wow.
No, he has 100 employees. 80 of them did not get paid last week.
What?
Yeah. And,
Wow.
And
That's a problem.
this is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is exactly what you're talking about. It's a major problem. I said, well, what happens if we can't figure this out in a couple of days?
Well, he has to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, have the guys walked off the job yet? He said, thankfully not yet. But
Wow.
I missed another payroll, and
Oh, I'm
I have
sure.
no workforce.
Oh, I'm sure.
So that's another area where we can, you know, where we've helped clients, and clients would say that gap between I have money, I need it to cover payroll.
Right.
You know, you can fill that by using receivables financing, by taking those funds that you're having to wait those 30, 60 days, whatever it is, to get paid from your customer.
Wow.
Bring that forward to alleviate those problems. And the challenge with that MCA thing was that
Merchant cash advance.
merchant cash advance that
Yes.
this gentleman had taken out, it served a very specific need. But now that he's in a position where he needs a senior lender to come in,
Right.
I can't do it because he owes these guys money, and there's not,
Well, they have a lien, right?
they have a lien in place, right?
Yeah.
A financing lien on the business, so they hold that collateral, right?
Wow.
I can't go lend against it because I need to have that right of first on those receivables, and unfortunately right now there's not much I can do for him. You know, we're trying to find him a consolidator, we're trying to find a secondary lender to come in and replace that one who's a little more,
Who will work with you?
right, amenable to working together, but the timing just didn't work.
Wow. So what Sean's talking about is, folks, in the asset-based lending or the factoring world, or even the equipment leasing world, it's just like buying a car. When you go and you purchase a car at a dealership, unless you paid cash for it, they're not going to hand you the title. You'll see that later when you pay it off. And what they'll do is the lender, whoever loaned the money for you to buy that car and make installment payments, they're going to list themselves as a lien holder on that title, which they will relinquish when it's paid off. But in our world, there's a different sort of car title that's used, and it's called a UCC financing statement. It's a Uniform Commercial Code financing statement. It is a United States, 50 states federal application. It's not state by state specific.
Well, the filing of it is
The filing is done in the state, but
And
UCC code is federal.
It's frameworks, right?
Yeah.
So it's a guide as to how each state should operate, and it just helps lenders like us figure out who's playing in the sandbox.
Exactly. It's a statement that's filed in Georgia. It would be filed with the Superior Court clerk, and there's a group in Georgia called the Georgia Superior Court Clerks Cooperative Authority, GSCCA. Great group. They warehouse all this information, and you can go there if you have an account, and you can log in, and you can look up your business, and it will tell you every lien that's been filed against your business. And it could be Kanika Minolta Copier has filed a lien on a Kanika Minolta copier in your office that says to Sean or I or anyone, even someone wanting to buy that copier, can research the lien on it, determine if it's lien free, because if they were to buy a piece of lien, if you still owe money on it and they buy it,
You owe them that money.
yeah, you buy the debt with it.
Yeah.
And so they would want to check that first. And so what Sean's talking about is there's a UCC that gets filed in our business against the accounts receivable of the company, because frankly that's the collateral. And
Yeah, the whole Article 9 UCC, that's a whole different video.